Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast. In this episode of Coaching Revealed, Dr. David Rosmarin unpacks his research on anxiety and belief that anxiety is not inherently a problem, it's a human emotion, and one that can highlight our values and build resilience. David shares his own experiences of a panic attack that reframed his thinking, describing how societal norms, especially in Western cultures, over-medicalize stress and contribute to an anxiety epidemic. David explains the differences between stress, fear, and anxiety, while providing practical tools for distinguishing between clinical impairment and normal emotional discomfort. First, identify. Use anxiety as a flashlight to discover what truly matters. Second, share. Deepen relationships through intentional vulnerability. Third, embrace. Build emotional resilience by facing challenges safely and gradually. And lastly, let go. Accept limits of control and find freedom in releasing expectations. And now, our conversation with David Rosmarin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Coaching Revealed. My name is Emily Terrani, and I'm here with my co-host, Austin Matzelle. And I'm so excited to be interviewing David H. Rosmarin, who is the current interim research director of the Institute of Coaching and an internationally recognized expert on spirituality and mental health. He has authored more than 100 peer-reviewed articles. He is a sought-after keynote presenter, workshop facilitator, and consultant for human resources teams, managers, and C-suite executives on how to handle mental health in the workplace. David has a deep-rooted passion for helping others, and he empowers people to thrive through self-awareness, connection to others, and a great sense of meaning and purpose in life. So thank you, David, for being here. My first question, I saw that you have a TEDx talk that's been viewed by over 800,000 people. And at the start of it, you mentioned your first panic attack, and you actually use humor to discuss it. So would love to learn more about what actually happened, how that felt, and, great jumping off point for our theme today about and around anxiety.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot, making me feel anxious at the gate. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to embrace it. Firstly, stepping onto the TEDx stage is perilous. So anxiety provoking, and then having it viewed by nearly 850,000 people is even more terrifying. I did speak about a panic attack that I had, and I remember it vividly. It was when I was starting Center for Anxiety as a clinical psychologist in my early career. I was balancing my work at McLean Hospital doing research with starting a clinical center focused on anxiety in New York City, and it required a commute and starting up really from scratch, and it was a very stressful time. And I remember one day I get off of the train and I'm walking to my office and I get a text from the only patient who I had in my schedule for that day who was canceling the session after I had made a 4-hour commute to New York City. So it was a hot day, it was in the summer, and all of a sudden my heart's beating a mile a minute. I'm struggling to catch my breath. And I remember thinking to myself, David, you're starting an anxiety center and here you are panicking on the streets of Manhattan, get a grip. By the time I got to my office, I realized that this was actually a normal response because what I was doing was insane, completely and utterly insane. And if I wasn't feeling that pressure and that intensity in that moment, then it probably means I wasn't pushing myself to the max or caring about what I was doing. And that flipped a switch. And I realized that anxiety, yes, it can become a disorder. When people have panic disorder, where it gets in the way of your life and occurs repeatedly, that's an issue which we do need to learn how to handle. But panic attacks are very normal and very common and happen when people are going through struggle and strain and relationship issues. And that is what happened to me. And it was actually a great experience. In retrospect, a very uncomfortable one, but something that really, really changed my perspective on anxiety.
I want to go off of how you've had this perspective around anxiety change, going from this place maybe of an immediate desire of avoidance into a space of maybe seeing it as a human emotion or a natural emotion that can occur to us. From your research, from your work in the space that you've done, why do you think it's a natural thing for so many people, for so many of us to just want to immediately fight off the anxious feelings that we're having or our anxiety?
Yeah, Austin, it's a good question. Firstly, I don't think it's a natural thing. I think it's a societal thing. If you look in other areas of the globe, it's actually quite normal to have stress and to have strain and to have some sort of angst and to be able to share that with others and to be able to identify what's going on with you and share it and have a conversation and then to embrace it and to have it feed into your life to build resilience and maybe even let go a little bit. In our society, though, we don't view it that way. We have a very biomedically based approach when it comes to anxiety. We immediately assume that any symptoms of anxiety are a disorder or a disease, which is incorrect. And we do not bifurcate between normal, healthy, I would say, emotion of anxiety on the one hand. Even though it's uncomfortable, it's still, I didn't say it's pleasant, but that doesn't mean it's unhealthy, right? Like working out isn't pleasant either, but it's healthy. It's something that builds grit. So I really see that certain aspects of anxiety the same way. And at a certain point, it does become disordered. So there's some truth in that model. There is some truth in it. And we have to give validity to that and deal with it in a clinical sense. And I do. Been trained to do that. So I understand that side of the coin very much. So I think that's the reason why we over pathologize low, normal, healthy levels of anxiety. And in doing so, we have actually exacerbated or created an anxiety epidemic.
Absolutely. And so in hearing that, I'm interested because as you referenced at the very top of this conversation, you were going to the anxiety clinic that you had founded when you kind of had this initial panic attack. And so I'm curious about how did you get into the research on anxiety? What's kind of like your relationship and history from a like overall picture, taking a little step back of your history with this research and work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm still kind of figuring that one out. I suppose we all are still figuring ourselves out in some way. They say research is me search, and I think that's definitely the case. A lot of us in mental health, although very few will admit it. When it comes to anxiety, I think I came by it naturally from a familial standpoint. Nothing sort of pathological, but certainly, or I should say disordered, but certainly, elements of it that I grew up with and things that made me anxious and uncomfortable. And I sort of wanted to explore that and understand it. And it's certainly been a journey to do that. In the clinical world, also, I was very impressed with how effective treatments are for anxiety disorders. And I was trained in cognitive and dialectical behavior therapy, and my Center for Anxiety provides that. We've treated more than 10,000 patients and families successfully over the last 14, 15 years. So to be able to do that and to scale it and to be able to see that happen, there are not a lot of areas in mental health where you have those types of effects. So I think that's another thing that drew me in, is that we really do have effective treatments for clinical anxiety. It's the non-clinical stuff, ironically, that actually gets us bent out of shape even more, and increasingly so, I would say, today.
Maybe just to start, it would be helpful to hear you explain how you define anxiety.
Sure.
Yeah, I think most people have an understanding of what it is, but since you've...
Yeah, I think everybody's been anxious, right? Like, I assume present company have had something that you would describe as anxiety. If you want to be technical about it, there's cognitive aspects of it, like worry or apprehension, or you're concerned about the future, foreboding thoughts, what's going to be, difficulty tolerating uncertainty is another sort of hot button topic over there on the cognitive side. On the behavioral side, people avoid some more, and not approaching situations that make you anxious, distracting yourself with the ubiquitous cell phone or whatever it is these days, use of substances and maybe even prescribed medications in order to not feel anxious, which is a behavior that comes out of anxiety. And then most of all is the physical, though, the physical and the emotional aspects of it. The beating heart, tachycardia, we call it, rapidly beating heart, I should say, difficulty breathing, unexplained sweating, muscle tension, all of the effects of the adrenal system going off, the fight or flight system. That is the constellation of anxiety, broadly defined. And a lot of the times it happens for a good reason, like I said, and it's not a problem necessarily. It's uncomfortable, but it's not a disease. In other cases, when it's interfering with your life, then that's a clinical matter. And that's something that, again, we have really great treatments for.
How does it differ from stress or relate to stress?
So I'm glad you asked. I actually have it's a question that I get asked so much that I prepared a free webinar on my website, DHROSMARIN.com, DHRosmarin.com. There's a tab on resources, and that's free for anybody to have. All the coaches, anybody listening is welcome to avail yourselves to that, and I can give you the link so you can put it in the show notes. Stress has the same physiological response. The difference is when it basically occurs when people have too much going on and not enough resources to be able to manage it. So the only way to rebalance with stress is to decrease your demands or to increase the resources that you have. There really isn't much else that can be done. Anxiety is a little different. It's when you're having this fear response but it's misapplied. It's not 100% in your face, the actual stress or the actual fear. So it's a what I would say a misfire of the fight or flight system.
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started. Yeah, I like to think, I've heard that when you step into a street and a car's coming by, the stress response, like stress is jumping backwards.
Okay. That's interesting. I always thought of that as fear, because fear is a clear and present danger. And if a car is 20 or 30 feet away and speeding towards you and you need to literally dart out of the way, that would be a fear response. If it's 100 yards away and you're nervous about it, or there's no car coming and then you're nervous, that would be anxiety. And stress would be more like you're late to catch the bus. So you don't have enough time to get there and you are running late for your meeting or something like that. An imbalance between the time resource and the time demand, which is placed on you.
Yeah. And so kind of bringing in, the audience here, we're talking a lot to coaches within this podcast. And so when it comes to this idea of anxiety, because so many people are experiencing it, everyone's experiencing it to some point, specifically for coaches and individuals who may be working with the general public who is experiencing anxiety, it's really good to start delineating between what is this place of uncomfortable anxiety and what is a clinical form of anxiety, where basically there's certain things that coaches may be able to do, but there's certain areas where it's probably they need to go to a trained mental health professional rather than just be talking with their coach.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you're asking. And, being trained as a clinical psychologist and someone who's worked at McLean Hospital in acute psychiatry and who's worked at Center for Anxiety in outpatient psychiatry, and now at this point in my career doing more coaching or ordinary work with people who do not have clinical anxiety, I have seen the gamut, and I'm very happy to opine about this. So the way I think about it is there are low, medium, and high levels of anxiety. And this whole thing, whether your anxiety is high, medium, or low, and think about this now as an audience member, is your anxiety today high, medium, or low? It's not zero, I hope not, because otherwise you're probably something worse has happened. And it's not like super high, like 10 out of 10. So we're talking about somewhere in the 1 to 9 range. So 1 or 2 or 3 would be a low, 4, 5, or 6 would be a medium, and 7, 8, 9 would be a high. Emily, how's your anxiety level today? Pick a number.
Probably 6.
Okay, I had a feeling, by the way, I've sort of built some antennas around this. And Austin, how about you? Where are you at today?
I think Emily stole my number, but let's go with 5.5.
Also high. Okay, like medium, in the medium range. So there, a lot of people feel medium levels of anxiety and they're like, oh my God, like something's really wrong here. That's not the only factor. It is a factor, but it's not the only factor. There's another aspect, another dimension, which is what's called functional impairment. What that means is this getting in the way of your life? Is that level of anxiety, whether it's low or medium, or even if it's high, although it's unlikely if it's high that it's not impacting, right? If you have high anxiety, 7, 8, or 9, probably you're having trouble sleeping, probably you're having trouble working, having trouble meeting all your demands, engaging with your relationships, but not necessarily. I have seen people with high levels, very rare, but I've seen people with high levels of anxiety. They're not functionally impaired. They're able to function in their life, and they're even able to do it long term. It's not like for 1 or 2 days. Like they actually thrive on those high levels of anxiety. I've met CEOs who are up at 4 a.m. and their anxiety is through the roof, but they actually really use it in a constructive way with a couple of tweaks and coaching along, which is human. But most people will, at a certain point along the scale, have that impairment in their life. At that point, you need professional help. If you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having trouble working, you're having trouble going to school, if it's getting in the way of your relationships, you can't do what you want to do. Are you achieving your goals in life in a fundamental way? If it's not because of anxiety, then you need some sort of professional help. But if it's just an uncomfortable aspect of your day, and maybe because of high stress or because of the news or because something's happening in your personal life or because you're starting a new business or starting a new career or things just got uncertain or you hit a financial setback or any number of reasons, why are we pathologizing that as opposed to seeing that as an aspect that coaches can really help with? And I think that's where the functional impairment question is really the most important for coaches to keep in mind.
To follow up on that specifically, for individuals who are at a place where they are continually feeling high anxiety or medium anxiety, and this is going to be a two-part question, but kind of the first end is, for those individuals who are self-reporting high and medium levels, are there some element of long-term health effects that might be impacting them? And when you are working with clients, does the sole idea of helping them not see their anxiety self-reported as high or medium as pathological, but if they view it as like, this is just the natural, or this is like, this is the way my body is giving me feedback right now, does that element impact how they view their physical experience?
Great questions. First is what's called the nocebo effect. When people perceive their anxiety as a problem, then it does have health consequences. But if you don't perceive it as a problem, if you see it as a normal reaction, it actually doesn't. I just saw something yesterday published by one of my colleagues in Stat 10 on this very subject when it comes to stress. And it was citing an article in Health Psychology from University of Wisconsin-Madison, where there's an interaction between our perception and the reality. We have been taught that anxiety is a problem and there's health issues with it and there's stress. And if you believe that to be the case, then yeah, it actually does manifest. There is a self-fulfilling prophecy about that. Even though the reality is, Austin, I've seen, again, over 10,000 patients at Center for Anxiety. Take a guess how many of them have died from high anxiety alone. I'm not talking about suicide, which is very real and very serious and very tragic. That's a behavioral response to anxiety and depression and other things, and that's for a separate discussion. But I'm talking about having anxiety go so high that their heart fails or that their brain fries or that kind of stuff, which I think was the direction. Take a guess how many patients we have lost to high anxiety alone.
Can I say 7?
No, the answer is 0, my friend. Big fat 0. And the same thing with all of my other colleagues who have anxiety centers all over the globe. Nobody loses patients to high anxiety. It will not kill you. Something else will kill you, not anxiety. Eventually we all go, but anxiety will not be the culprit. That's not the specter of the angel of death. However, if you perceive it as a problem, then of course it's going to spike, because the minute you feel anxious, now you're going to feel stressed too. So your cortisol levels are going to spike, and the next thing you got an issue. And that's your second question. This message has become my main message, is that anxiety is both a clinical disorder at a certain level and a normal emotion that all human beings, all healthy, high-functioning human beings will experience at some point. And that is, I believe, very, very much a balm or a salve or a corrective to the over-medicalized approach that we're taking to anxiety in this day and age. So yeah, it's huge.
That's so interesting because when you were speaking earlier, when we first were opening this up, I was thinking about how do we get people to have a mindset shift on anxiety isn't all bad, and is the fact that we avoid it making it more likely that someone might have a clinical level of anxiety?
I'll tell you what happens today. The minute a person feels anxious, either they or their coach will say, uh-oh, there's a referral. And who do they refer to? Usually a primary care physician who spends less than 3 minutes doing an assessment, uses maybe the generalized anxiety disorder 2-item scale, asks how much anxiety they've had in the last 2 weeks, how much worry they've had in the last 2 weeks. The answer is not going to be 0. So they have a score, which means that now that is entered into their medical chart and it flags them for a prescription for a benzodiazepine. That is literally the process, which is why 100 million people in this country are prescribed benzodiazepines on an annual basis. I have no problems against the use of medication. In fact, many patients I've seen need more. However, the automatic prescription, the automatic reaction that all anxiety is disordered and requires medical treatment is not doing any favors. I think it's actually making the anxiety epidemic substantially worse.
What would you recommend a coach do instead? Like, what should the first response be?
Great. Ask questions. Get curious. Don't get anxious about your client's anxiety. That's not going to help the situation. And you know that's what happens more than, uh-oh, they mentioned the A word. What's going to happen here? Their head's going to explode unless I refer them. Like, ask some questions first. Is it interfering with your life? How often does it occur? Is it throughout the entire day? Is it just today? Has it been happening for a long time? Are there circumstances in your life that might explain it? These are basic questions. This is not a clinical interview, right? I'm making these up on the spot. And most of all, is this interfering with your life? If they're like, then you are probably looking at a referral, short to medium term referral, and then they can come back to coaching, which is great. But more often than not, they just need a reset on the expectation. The expectation is not to have an anxiety-free life.
How can a coach then help a client actually embrace it, do different things, techniques, things like that?
It's a great question. So I've developed a 4-step process, which actually was in that TEDx talk, the TEDx Nashville talk. And ever since I've been on that horn, and I'm really honed it into an actual modular 4-step approach to help people at non-clinical levels of anxiety, not only deal with it, but actually turn it into something to thrive, to turn it into something that enhances your life, that enhances your connection, enhances your self-awareness, enhances your resilience, and helps you to become a more relaxed human being. I have some other materials on my website, including a masterclass. In fact, we're partnering with a bunch of coaches these days as affiliates to be able to do that, which is really wonderful to just see it getting out to the world. And those 4 steps I think are golden and perfectly within the on brand, if you will, for coaches.
Yeah. What are the 4 steps and how do we we'll dive into each one a little bit. So maybe just a big overview on the model first, and then we can go deeper into each.
You got it. 4 steps. I'll tell you one by one. The first is to identify. The second is to share. Third is to embrace. And the fourth is to let go. Identify, share, embrace, and let go. And I will take you through each one. So identify means to figure out why you feel anxious. Usually the first thing people do when they feel anxious, they pick up their phone, they call a friend to distract themselves, they watch something on Netflix, they work because they don't want to feel it. They might drink, they might do whatever it is. They don't want to sit and think about what's making them feel anxious. So the first step is to identify what is at the root of that. So stop what you're doing. It doesn't have to be right away, but within 24 hours, if you feel super anxious or even medium anxious, this actually goes for the both of you. If you're at a 6 or a 7 on a given day, within the next 24 hours, go for a walk by yourself and think, why am I anxious? What's going on? Maybe you're aware of it already. By the way, you might have done this, but what is setting you off? And what about that situation is setting you off? Probe the depths of your psyche using anxiety as a flashlight to get there. And when you do, it actually is oh my God, I'm anxious about that because of this. Holy moly, that's crazy stuff. And it becomes a self-discovery exercise just to ask, what's it about? Simple questions. And identify is all where it's at.
I want to just touch a little bit more on that concept that you specifically said of probing the depths of your yourself, using your anxiety as a flashlight. I love that imagery. And from the 10,000 patients that you've worked with through your center, do you have some examples of people that have come through that have referenced their anxiety and then kind of utilize that process to maybe identify the source of it?
I would say it the other way. I have never met a patient who wasn't anxious about something for a very good reason. People become have anxiety disorders. People become anxious about that which they care about the most. It might on the surface not be it. They might be concerned about money, but what they're really concerned about is the consequences of the finances. Might be losing a relationship or something which is really shows who they are as a person. And that's often a very good thing. There's something very real there because of an experience they've had. I have a coaching group for the 4 steps actually on the masterclass, which I created, which is on my website. So one of the participants last night was saying how she's very concerned about health. She has hypochondriasis. She has a lot of health anxiety. And when she was young, she was talking about her mom and how her mom was sick at some point and she was really concerned about losing that relationship forever. So it hits at the depths of her soul that she's going to be alone. Who wants to be alone, man? That's not a problem. That's a human need. So that's where I'm going with this. I can't think of a single case where somebody wasn't anxious about something for a very good reason.
That speaks to how anxiety is valid and not something that we should be avoiding.
Even when it's clinical, what's interesting, right?
How does sharing tie into this once you identify what it is?
Okay. So once you figured it out, see, and by the way, these are in order. So don't skip. Don't skimp on identifying. Don't just go and share with a friend, because often people will share at a surface level without really probing the depths. But once you've figured out what you really care about and why you're anxious, call up Emily on the phone and have that conversation, right? Pour your heart out to Austin. Feel that connection. And when you do, it creates a human moment with that person. If you think about it, the people who you're closest to in your life, might they be the people who've cried on their shoulder when you were having a rough time? And sharing anxiety creates a human experience, a human connection. Harness it in that way. Use it to connect with other people as opposed to putting up barriers. To clarify, anxiety can definitely get in the way of our relationships when we don't embrace that vulnerability. But if you can channel your inner Brene Brown, it's gold.
So with this step of sharing, you mentioned that it's important to not skip steps. In the step of sharing, are there other elements that people should keep in mind for a best practice?
Absolutely, yeah. So in the masterclass on my website, I take people through it. The one is to share with intention. I guess I'll say this, not just to share, get it off. We're not talking about a random text that you just send to a friend and then it's off your chest. We're talking about setting up the conversation. Hey, Austin, our relationship means a lot to me, and we've been friends a long time. And, I've got something that's been on my mind recently, and I really want to sort of share it with you. It's not about our relationship. It's just about me. But I think you're the guy who, would you mind if we grabbed a coffee or a beer and would you give me 20 minutes or 30 minutes and we can just chat about it? That would mean a lot to me. So set up the conversation, put away your phone, share with intention, and pick someone who's going to validate you and be nice. Austin, I assume you would do that if I called you up. Probably.
He would.
Yeah, I hope so.
And then create greater connection with intention. So you're sharing with intention.
And for coaches, within the coaching context, if a client is indicating that they have anxiety, this is another reason why it's really important that the coach isn't accidentally or intentionally demonizing the anxiety and creating that safe space for a client to share.
Yeah, I love that. When your client raises anxiety, that's an opportunity to connect with them in a deeper way. They're opening up to you. And if you immediately pathologize it, then you might miss out on the opportunity. At the same time, ask them if it's interfering with their life. And if it is, then you can do both. You can hold their hand and be their coach, be their confidant, while getting them some more sophisticated, so to speak, clinical services on a temporary basis. And we do that all the time. That's collaborating with coaches is something my clinic does regularly, and we love it.
That third step of embracing too, we've already been touching in it. Anything else that you would want to add there?
Oh man, embrace is my favorite. Embrace is something also that the CEOs are the greatest at, right? They're the ones who are like, I'm going to embrace this anxiety and it doesn't matter what barriers are in my way and I'm going to storm the Bastille. We are going to do this, right? It doesn't matter how many bullets are flying, they're surging and going forward. And that grit is something to be said. Often, though, those said CEOs, their family members have trouble keeping up in the war. And they do need to learn how to identify more and share more. And I found that when you're coaching business executives, even though embrace is something that I think everybody here probably knows how to do in the coaching world, don't assume that they haven't skipped steps, and make sure that they're able to hear other people and their anxiety and sort of give them that. And also that they're able to share. Getting a vulnerable moment with a business leader is a great gift to them and to their family. Sometimes you have to fill in the gaps along the way, even though somebody's embracing it very well. But the basic idea is when you face anxiety, it will build your emotional resilience, just like when you face physical challenges like in a gym or on the track, that will build your physical strength and resilience.
Would you consider there be a potential risk for people kind of viewing the pathologizing and embracing as two sides of a coin, where maybe someone could go too far into embracing, or is that not necessarily something that you find concern in?
As long as it's done with guidance and in a structured way, I don't have any problems embracing anxiety, unless it's unsafe. I wouldn't have somebody do base jumping. I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff. But I might have them go up to a very high skyscraper and like press their nose against the window and like lean over. It's not physically dangerous. So as long as it's not physically dangerous and they are prepared for that level, like you don't jump to a 10 out of 10. I'm not going to bench press 300 pounds. I might start with my body weight and then move up by 10 pounds a week or every 2 weeks. And then eventually, maybe I could hit 300, but I'm not going to do that right away. So too with anxiety, I wouldn't do it right away. But with those two caveats, if it's safe and you've worked up to it, push it, man. That's what it's for. Exposure therapy, we do this. Like this is what clinicians do with exposure therapy. We have people face their anxiety to the nines.
Is there a world, since you are also coaching yourself and you're working with coaches in collaboration with the clients that you're serving, where maybe they're not pushing clients to a 9, but is there a realm in which coaches are able to utilize elements of exposure therapy with their clients in embracing anxiety?
Yeah. So I want to throw in a caveat here that if it's causing clinical issues for the person, then I wouldn't even push much at all. I would work with a clinician to refer them. But if it's not, and it's simply they're using it as a grit building exercise, go for it. Maybe you have to move beyond your own discomfort and your own anxiety about it. And it is scary to encourage people to do things that you're not sure how they're going to work out and facing that uncertainty. I remember doing that early in my career also when I started helping people with exposure therapy. It's certainly a learning curve, but it's something that I think it's a life skill when it's not used for clinical anxiety.
How do you move people into the stage of being able to let go, which is, I'm sure, what a lot of people want to just jump right into. But
I am still figuring that one out. But I'll tell you some sort of general ideas. First, anxiety shares the exact same physiological response as excitement. When you're at the top of that roller coaster and you're about to come down, your stomach has this big pit in it. You're starting to sweat a little. You're feeling that muscle tension and you're like, ah! But there's one key difference between that and anxiety. Actually, two key differences. It's voluntary. You put yourself on that roller coaster and you expect it. As long as you expect it and you are a voluntary participant, it feels good to let go. And the key, therefore, in anxiety is to expect that it will happen and to participate in it voluntarily as opposed to involuntarily, to actually invite it into your life in some regards. What that means ultimately is something that I'm still working on, which is whatever you are afraid of, can you actually let go that might happen? Now, I realize when it comes to health anxiety, that is terrifying. When it comes to financial anxiety, oh my God. When it comes to relationships, really, really anxiety provoking to say the least. It's very uncomfortable. But there's an aspect of embracing our humanity and recognizing the limits of our control and leaning into that and saying, okay, like if that's what's got to be, then maybe that's what's got to be. And I only have so much control over that. And that's actually not necessarily a bad thing. That's just part of my human condition. To really go there in your mind is an exercise. And I don't think it's necessarily possible to be there 24/7, but I think we can have moments of really letting go. And those moments can be transformative.
Yeah, I feel like you were referencing earlier a client who they were going through the potential, of being alone. If that is something that does occur, then that is in their reality. There's maybe an element where you can have acceptance of it, but it's not like you can just be 100% accepting of that from the onset of that happening when it's out of your control and then not fall into a place of anxiety is my assumption. In terms of clients dealing with things that are completely justifying of them experiencing the anxiety, it's trying to find a balance of acceptance or of elements that help them feel like they aren't completely just spiraling out of control.
I mean, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. This person was concerned about her mother's health. How much control does she have over that? Not much. That's a difficult pill to swallow voluntarily. But then again, it's not impossible to step into accepting that reality that's actually a very much character building exercise and something in virtue to become more humble and accepting. Austin and Emily, and all your listeners today, our reference point for dealing with anxiety is a society that is obsessed with control. We are obsessed with being in control all the time. every once in a while, when that veil falls and the reality becomes very clear that there are limits to what we can do as human beings and what we can know, all of a sudden we're consumed with anxiety because we're exposed to the reality of our lack of control. Accepting that up front voluntarily and leaning into it makes things more clear. For example, like Austin, what's the most important thing in your life?
For me, I'd say my community.
And when you say your community, do you mean your relationship, the relationships that you have with others?
Yeah, like people nearest and dearest to me.
Would you say the relationship that you have with other people is also related to your character?
Yeah, I'm not like 100% able to fully discern this, but I view myself as an individual, as someone who I just have a very deep appreciation of the fact that it is somewhat a rare thing to connect with people based on the number of people we interact with on a daily basis, the number of people that you then build relationships with where you touch base multiple times throughout life. I find that I have a lot of appreciation and awe in the fact of the people that become friends or become partners or in any way beyond just a transactional relationship. It's very impressive to me.
I love what you're saying about transactional. In order to become a non-transactional connector, who do you have to be as a person?
I would say you have to be interacting from a non-reactive place.
Calm, thoughtful, generous, humble, kind, compassionate. Virtues? What would you trade to have those virtues in your life? What would you give up?
A very good question. I mean, honestly, I think to be able to have that level of peace, I would definitely give up a lot of material possessions, honestly.
What's more important? At the end of the day, what's more important? Once we refocus on it and let go of the stuff that we're anxious about, you actually realize it's right there. Whatever you really want, which is to become that person, just walk up and take it. But you got to let go first. Like I said, I'm still working on it myself. It actually gets me like a little bit anxious just to even talk about this, but I am working on it.
It's cool though that you lean into it and you're, walking the talk.
Yeah. Trying. Catching me on a good day, Emily.
So you've mentioned your Center for Anxiety a lot, and I'm wondering if you could explain a bit about what you're specifically doing there, who you work with, what the mission is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super proud. The last couple of years I've been doing much more thought leadership and much more stuff in the corporate world. And like you mentioned, keynotes and the TEDx journey has been fun, and I have another book that I'm working on and that kind of stuff. And also it's been really nice to be doing it with the Institute of Coaching in my new role as the interim director of research, and being able to meet some really, really cool people there, including Jeff Hall and the two of you, of course, and many others. So I'm less involved these days than I used to be. At the same time, like I'm just so proud of our team, and I love that the quality of service. Like I feel very proud that our team is still servicing at any point in time, hundreds of patients and their families with clinical anxiety disorders, collaborating with coaches and also with medical professionals and all people all over, people from the community, with the offices in New York and also in Boston. I think we've got a great URL, centerforanxiety.org, so it's easy to remember. And I personally connect with people who are referring and who want to find out more. That's one of the outreach roles that I actually personally, again, though, it's for people who are having clinical anxiety and having levels of anxiety that are interfering with their lives. For people who simply are anxious and functioning well day to day, there are other tools that I myself have created and that coaches are very well equipped to handle.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of coaches will interact and interface with clients that are facing, anxiety, anxiousness, not necessarily at a clinical level. And they too themselves are dealing with their own anxiety and have to show up for their clients too.
Of course, I think many coaches carry a lot on their shoulders. At some point, statistically speaking, between 20 and 30% of the population is going to have a clinical anxiety disorder. So, and that includes coaches too. So, we're here for that, whether it's 2 sessions or 5 sessions or something more ongoing, that this is something that that Center for Anxiety does day and night.
Yeah. And I also really appreciate too, I think throughout this conversation, you've kind of mentioned too, that you were saying about step 4 of your model. That's something that you're still working on, that element of letting go. And it's really important to also hear just people acknowledging and talking about when it comes to something like anxiety, it is a lifelong journey.
100%. The emotion of anxiety is a lifelong struggle. There's only one type of person who does know anxiety, someone who's dead. And, I would prefer to push that one off and to deal with my anxiety for years to come. There are also people who don't acknowledge their anxiety, but that's not because they don't have it. It's probably just because they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for, sharing. I know this is a topic near and dear to my heart, as you already, assessed. I face it myself. I help a lot of clients with it. It's, it's not only individual, it's definitely at a societal level. I would define our American culture here as anxious, as you also did.
My great pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And then just, you mentioned your center a couple of times, but are there any other ways that you would want people to be able to connect with you or be able to learn more about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. Coaches can reach out. Absolutely. Coaches can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there and have some other folks from my team who manage my account. So by all means, please do reach out. DH Rosmarin is my handle. And also my website, DHROSMARIN.com. Like I mentioned, there's some free resources. I have a weekly newsletter that goes out. It's about 250 words in and out of your inbox. Lots of fun anecdotes and cool stuff. And I just love to engage. So if people have questions about anxiety, anything that I'm doing, send me a note, whether it's, referral, a question, something personal, I'm here.
Awesome. And we like to ask this a lot at the end of our interviews. If there was one thing that you want the audience to take away from our conversation today, what would that be?
Anxiety is an emotion. Primarily, it is an emotion. Yes, it can become disordered. It can get in the way of your life, in which case you might need some therapy or medication to deal with it. But by and large, anxiety is something that unites all human beings. And if you have it, then, well, welcome to the human race.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Coaching Revealed. We are so excited to have David on this episode of the podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you all.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Terrani with Coaching Revealed.